Hey gang, welcome to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is a sponsored video for YesWelder. In this video, I plan to open up this Firstess CT2050 7-in-1 multifunction machine. As you already know, this machine has a built-in plasma cutter, a built-in compressor to operate the plasma cutter, a stick weld function, AC TIG, DC TIG, AC pulse TIG, and DC pulse TIG. So I want to open up this box, show you what's inside, and how to connect the various components to the machine. So what I'm going to do is place the box on the floor and then lift up the components and set them on top of this table. The first thing out of the box is another box, and this has a variety of materials in it, the various torches and leads and all those different things. So I'll pull those out again and show you those separately, but that's the first thing that I took out of the box. So let me set that aside. So here we have the main machine. It has some foam on each end. So we'll remove those pieces. And of course a bag to hold everything. And just to show you, this is a 220 outlet. There will be an adapter to take this down to 110. So looking at the front of the machine, you have 5 connection ports at the bottom. You also have an adjustment knob here in the center, and then switches that control various functions of the machine. Now, I will go more into this later as to how this connects. I just wanted to show you what you'll see in the front. At the back of the machine, there is a mount point for your water oil separator for operation of the compressor. There is a gas inlet for your argon, power switch, power cord, and then up here are 2 more connections. This says arc voltage and this says control switch arc success. So I'll have to look a little bit more into that as to what those connect to. But this is the back of the machine. You have 2 fans, and that's pretty much it. So let's look at the components that connect to this. So let's take a look at what's in the secondary box. Right in the middle here you have your adapter. This is to take you from 220 down to 110. I'm going to set that aside. This is your hose connection that goes from your argon tank to the welder itself. We'll set that aside. We have some, basically, I think this is, I don't know if it's considered PVC or Teflon, but this is tubing that will connect to your oil and water separator. That's all in this box. So I'll take that out. So we'll get into more of that later. There's a bracket inside the box as well. That's what that connects to with these 2 connectors. And these are push to connect type of connectors. This bag contains the stinger for stick welding. So pretty basic, we'll set that aside. This bag contains your plasma cutter. You take that out of the bag. So there appears to be 3 connections at the end of that. We'll look at that a little further. But what I like about this setup is I have another plasma cutter from YesWelder and they've added this little tip on the end here to keep you off of the metal. That's a really great addition to this tool. We'll set this aside. Here we have your ground clamp. And again, I like this. This is an upgrade. The other clamps that I've had or have on the other tools are a lighter duty type of clamp, but this, that's nice and heavy and thick, so I like that setup. We'll set that aside. And this is your TIG package. So let me open this up. Inside of this you have your cups, your various cups that connect to the TIG torch, your connectors that hold the tungsten, and again the sleeve here for the tungsten to go in the back of the torch. I'll show you how to hook that up in just a minute. Pull this out, and it appears you have a dial setting here on the back of what I like to say is a stinger. So it looks like that's an adjustment from 0 up to 10, and a little push button function. We'll look more at that in just a minute as well. It's got a nice feel to it. Okay, so now let's see how these components connect to the machine. So the first thing I want to connect, just to show you, since I'm working from the left side or this side of the machine, let's say to the right side, is the ground clamp. Now, per the instructions, you just put this in. It only fits one way, and then you rotate that, and it cam locks into it. So it has a little post on the end of this right here. That's what you line it up with. So we'll put that in. Again, turn that, and that'll hold it in place. I'm going to take that back out and just set it to the side for the moment, so I'm not getting it in my way. Now, the connectors here, there are 3 of these. I want to make sure I get them all out in the open. You've got 3 of these. This main connector connects to this lug on what would be, as you're looking at it, the right side of the machine. So that again has a lug on it, only lines up one way. Put it in, turn it, and lock it into place. Then you have your gas line, and that connects over here. Pretty simple. I'm going to take that line, line that up, thread that on. And then you have a 5-pin connector. This also has a little notch cut in it. It connects to this position. There's only one way that that'll fit. There's a little kind of a lump down in the bottom of that. And so that lines up on that. Slide that in. And then there's a retaining collar that you need to tighten up to hold that in place. I'm just going to put the ground back in place. So now you can see that's your basic connection for using the TIG. Now while we're here at this point, I want to show you something else. YesWelder has sent me a foot pedal. My understanding is you can operate this without the foot pedal. Should be fine. But they also offer this foot pedal apparently. So this arrived the other day, and there's the instructions for it. Variety of diagrams and whatnot to show you where things and how things connect. But what I found is this takes place of this. So this threaded connector that I put on, at least from what I can see, you take that back out, you've got another 5-pin connector cable, and that will line up and thread back into that position, again with a collar to retain it. So you have to tighten that up. And then this thing, I think this is like probably a, I don't know, 12 to 16 foot cable. Pretty long. But it has, on the pedal itself, it has another 5-pin connector. So that lines up, only fits one way. Slide that together, thread that on, and tighten down the collar. Now you have pedal control. Again, I believe this is an option. This did not come in the main box, just know that. So let me show you the components that are attached to the TIG torch. So if I open this up, you've got 3 different cups and they have numbers on them. So if you see that, that's a number 4, and you can see the size of that opening is small. Here is a number 5, and the opening is slightly bigger. And this is number 6, and it is also bigger. Now keep in mind, these are, I believe, ceramic, so if you drop these, they're going to break. Along with that, you have this little cap that goes on the back of the torch, and I'll show you why you need that. This is the protective sleeve for your tungsten. It also goes in place of the small cap on the back of your torch. And then you have 3 different collars that will hold your different sizes of tungsten. So this one is 1/16, pretty small. Then you have, I believe, 1/8, and you also have, I believe it should be 3/32. So you have 3 different sizes. I should have those in order, I guess. Smallest to largest, so you can see the different sizes. And then you have the holder, the threaded portion, that each one of these goes into. So the first thing I'll install is the long piece, because I have a long piece of tungsten. It has an O-ring on it, and that helps seal it because you're going to have flow through this. So be careful that O-ring doesn't get out of place. I want to make sure it sits inside of the main body there. Okay, so that's in. So let me set that aside. I'm going to take a piece of tungsten. Now this did not come in the kit. This is something that I bought separately. That's going to go into, this is a 1/16. It's going to go into the sleeve that holds it. And then this piece goes over top. And what's going to happen is I'm going to insert this into what I'll just say the TIG torch, tighten this down. And what that does is it compresses. There's a little slit in these holders. You maybe just see that line cut into those, and it compresses around that and holds it in place. So to adjust it, you just loosen this up and slide it in and out. That's why you have this long section back here to protect the tungsten and create a seal. Now, if you're working in a tight space and you have a short piece of tungsten, you can replace the long cap with the short cap. So that's why that's in there. So I get this where I want it. Let's say you can decide which cup you need. That's up to you on that, and that will thread on to that piece. So you have to make your adjustments. If this is not out far enough, you have to take things loose, adjust this, move your tungsten, tighten that back up, and tighten that back up. And again, it's up to you as to what sizes you want to use based on what you're doing with your welding. So that takes care of the functions of the TIG. Now we're going to move on to the plasma cutter and connecting everything to that. I also want to point out, in looking at this control, I've never seen a TIG torch like this, and I think this is pretty unique. I'm under the assumption here that when you turn this dial, it'll increase or decrease voltage if you're not using the foot pedal. And then you have a push button here that I'm assuming gives power to the torch. So that's why I see it. I don't know for sure, but I think that's how it operates. So now that I've shown you the TIG, I'm going to disconnect everything and show you how to set up for the plasma cutter. So we're going to use the ground clamp again, and that will still go into, let's say, the left side as you're looking at it. That's how that attaches, same concept. So the torch itself has 3 connections. You've got basically an air line, you've got your pin connector, which is again the 5-pin connector, goes in the same location, and then you have this third wire, which is going to connect to this red location. Now there's a couple of washers on here. They're little thin washers, and I can only say, I'm going to assume, that you put that on, 1 washer behind, 1 washer in front, and thread that on. Again, this 5-pin connector will go to this location, tighten the collar, and this is something I found that is pretty interesting. They give you this little tool, and that attaches to the end of the air line, because you can thread this on with your hand, but this little tool acts as kind of a extension. So you slip that onto the nut of the or the collar, and then you can thread this on the same way. It just gives you a little more torque. So there are the connections for the plasma cutter. So again, I like this, we'll say, torch head. It has a safety on it, so you can only access the trigger when you move that out of the way. Again, it has this little extension there, so you can put it up against steel and not actually have your tip against the steel. And you can use that to take the collar off. And inside you'll have your tip with a hole in it and your electrode, and that just slides out. Now there's more to the torch. I'm going to have to work on the back side of the machine, so I'm going to turn this around and show you what needs to happen. One little thing I'd like to point out, if you are storing this, make sure you keep this little rubber cover. That's going to go over that fitting right there. While we're still here at the front of the machine, I want to show you how to connect your stick welder. So the ground clamp will go into the ground port as we have done before. Turn and lock that in. And the working end, the handle, the stinger, whatever you want to call it, goes into the positive. Lock that in, and that takes care of the stick welder. Okay, so I'm looking at the back of the machine, and there's several things we need to connect here. For the plasma cutter, we're going to use these 2 fittings here and these screws. This is for the argon, so that's going to be for the TIG welding function. So and at this point, I'm not going to worry about that. In this box, you have your oil and water separator. You have this bracket, and that bracket will mount where those screws are. Now looking at that, the way I just set that up in there, may not be the best choice because it's actually hitting that little protector for the screen. I don't think it would hurt anything, but you could probably flip this over. The only concern would be as to whether or not the length of this puts that too low. So at this point it's going to sit about there, if you turn that bracket over, it's going to sit too low. So go ahead and put it on like that, and it'll be fine. Because basically this has this collar that holds it to that bracket. So what I was saying was, if you put it, that sits really low on this. If you put it like that, it's going to be too low and it'll hit. So before I put that on, there are some other pieces. Oh, and you may find that in the bag there are a couple small nuts. The reason for that is there may be another design out there that this has posts that are permanent, and these would be used to attach to those posts. So in this case we don't need them, so you can set those aside. The other thing we're going to need is these little fittings. In this bag you'll find two 90-degree elbow fittings, and they should have O-rings already on them, but you have two extra O-rings. Yeah, this just snaps into place, so there's really nothing I can do otherwise. I'm not sure where I would use those O-rings. I don't see any place you can take this apart and put them in there, so we'll set those aside for now. And then these have a 9/16 flange on them, so they've already got some, looks like Teflon attached to the threads. So we'll put this in, and you could add more Teflon if you wanted to. And then you can turn that elbow whichever way you want it. So at this point, we can install that, put the collar on. Now this could be kind of maybe a little more of a challenge. If you look at these are very short elbows, for this transition. You can angle these slightly, that'll help some, but this one specifically says gas in, and this one says gas out. And per the drawing that I have, this is going to go to this one, this one's going to go to that one. So we'll get out the tubing that came with the kit, and obviously you're not going to need much of this. A very short piece is going to take care of that and take care of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see just how far this goes up inside. So if I just push that up, maybe it's probably about that distance. Let's see what happens. Oh, went further than I thought. Okay, that's fine. Now what I'm going to do is take, in this case, a big pair of scissors, and I'm going to kind of guesstimate where I want that length to be and cut that off. And again, the challenge is going to be getting these in without causing problems. Now, of course, you could take everything loose and kind of just push it together, but I think in this case I'll be okay. It's going to make me just a hair shorter. Sorry if my hands are in the way, but it's kind of tough to manipulate this with everything being small and tight. So there we have our connections for the oil and water separator. And while we're here, let's go ahead and talk about the gas line. So this just threads in, and it wouldn't hurt to put a crescent wrench onto, or whatever side. This I believe is a 3/4 because this is a 5/8. But you're going to snug that down, and that'll connect your gas line that would go to your argon bottle. So that's connected. Okay, now that that is out of the way, let's turn the machine on. The switch is in the back on the left side as you're looking at it. Now we get to look at all the display up here at the front. There's a variety of things we're going to look at, but I want to start with this switch up here. This has your weld mode. So you have AC TIG, DC TIG, stick, cut, and you'll see there's a little compressor there. That's for an external air compressor. And cut compressor, that is the compressor that's built into the machine. Here you're going to have 2T and 4T. This is torch mode. Let me go back up to the TIG so it also lights up your foot pedal. Now if you do 2T and 4T, what that means is if you're using your torch, 2-touch or 4-touch. So 2T, you squeeze the trigger mechanism and you hold it. When you let go, it stops. That's for 2T. On 4T, you hold and let go if you want to, and it'll continue to operate. Squeeze it again and let go, and it'll shut off. So that's how that works. And then, of course, your foot pedal. So if you're in 2T and 4T, the foot pedal and the switch on the TIG torch will not operate. So if you want to use the pedal and the switch on the TIG torch, you have to be on the foot pedal circuit. Okay, let's go over some of this stuff up here. We have on the side here, we'll talk about this, but this is weld position and this is thickness, and you also have a smart function right here. So if we're on AC TIG, you can push this center switch and it changes your settings in each one of these little indicators. So right off the top you have pre-gas. So you can set this for 1 to 15 seconds on pre-gas. Press the button again, you go to start mode. This allows you to set your start amperage, and on 110 you have a max of 80 and a minimum or a min of 5, and on 220 you have a max of 160. This machine is plugged into 110 right now, so the max is 80. Slope up. What this is for is increasing your amperage from the time you start. And what that does is allows you to get comfortable with your torch. You may have to reposition a little bit, and it makes the amperage increase at a certain rate. So let me go back to that. It's wanting to advance. So you can change that up to 10. So just for a time range. Now this should be for your max amperage. So in this case, again, we're set on 110 voltage. So this goes to 160, and on 220 that would go up to 200. This is the rate that you want the amperage to decrease. And this is very handy if you're working on, let's say, aluminum, and you want to decrease the likelihood of having a crack or a pinhole. Then you adjust that slope to a longer number, and that's how the rate at which, or the time it takes it to decrease. Now this is your stop amperage. The max is 100 on 110 volts, and on 220 it would be 200. And then post gas, that's how long you want the gas to run after the weld is complete, just to help keep it clean, and you can set that to whatever you want. I should also point out, this is showing the voltage right now. So this is showing 122 volts. Down here you have a balance, and you can set that from 10 to 65%. And then this is your hertz, and it doesn't matter if it's on 220 or 110. The minimum is 20 and the maximum is 250. So that's the basic AC TIG function. Now if you want to use AC pulse TIG, you hold this button down in the center 5 seconds, and it turns on the pulse function. So from there you can adjust, in this case up to 160, and that's your hertz. So you can pulse up to 200. So we're going to turn off the pulse function, hold that down for 3 seconds, turns that off. The next thing on the list is smart mode. So you push that button and that'll light up these switches on this side. And what these are, you can switch your positioning. So in this case, if you wanted to weld flat, you set it on the upper portion there. You can do vertical, and you can also do overhead. Now you'll notice when you do that, it changes your amperage. This button here, this is your metal thickness. So there it's on 18 gauge, 16 gauge, and you can see the amperage changing. 14 gauge, 1/8 inch, and 3/16. Now I'll tell you, if you hit this to try to change anything, it turns it off. So once it's in smart mode, leave it there. Otherwise it's just going to turn it off on you. You can still change these, like I said. The next setting is AC TIG Smart Pulse. So we're going to turn the pulse function back on and then hit smart. Same thing, you can control these elements on the side. But once you start changing it, it shuts it off. Alright, let's go to DC TIG. Again, you have 2T, 4T, and foot pedal will operate the foot pedal itself or the switch on the TIG torch. So again, you can change the parameters. We have pre-gas, start, your slope up, slope down, stop, and post gas. Same function as the AC TIG button. You can also do DC pulse. So that'll turn that on. Again, you can change the parameters like we talked about before. I think that'll cover almost everything with the AC and the DC function. We go to stick, and this one you've only got really this control, which shows your amperage. This is your. Then you have arc force, which goes from 40 down to 0. Your hot start goes from 0.1 to 0.6 seconds. Now if we go to cut mode, as I mentioned earlier, it has a little compressor. That is for your external air compressor. And you have these functions. You have a pre-gas, which you can go up to 3 seconds on that. Your start, which goes from 10 to 25 amps. The slope up, you can go all the way up to 10 seconds. I1 goes from as low as 12 and as high as 25. Slope down, again, you go up to 15. Stop is 12 to 20, 10 to 25. And then post gas, you can go up to 15 seconds. This should be the same function if you are using the compressor built into the machine. And I should point out this also has 2-touch and 4-touch function. On stick mode, there's also another function called voltage reduction device. You hold in on this button, center button again, for about 5 seconds, and VRD comes on. It is recommended that you use the voltage reduction device to help with the welding process. So that'll be the end of this video. Hopefully you found some information that'll help you when you start using your Firstess CT2050 by YesWelder. I do want to thank YesWelder for giving me the opportunity to make this video, and whether you are using your stick welder, your plasma cutter, or your TIG torch, I hope you have great success in any of your projects. But until next time, take care of yourselves. See you.